go, fellas. All right. Thank you all for being here in our grand jury room. Andrea Constand came here to Norristown for justice, and that's what 12 jurors from Montgomery County provided her. And I would be remiss if I did not thank first those 12 jurors for their diligence, the sacrifices that they made, as well as the sacrifices of their families so that they could serve in this important duty that they did. So today we're finally in a place to say that justice was done. As prosecutors, we have a responsibility to seek justice, and we have to go wherever and to whomever it takes us. And to begin, I want to step back to a point that was pretty decisive in this case, and that's when Judge Rebreno released a civil case deposition and indicated in his opinion that the defendant's deposition showed the stark contrast between Bill Cosby, the public moralist, and Bill Cosby, the subject of serious allegations concerning improper and perhaps criminal conduct. At that point, the prosecutors, who are here to do the right thing, and specifically my predecessor, Risa Vetri-Furman, opened up and reopened this investigation. So that's a duty, but that duty took courage because she had to open up a case against a powerful man. But I can say definitively that that's one of the things that is done over and over again in the Montgomery County District Attorney's Office. We have shown from our record that money and power, or who you are, will not stop us from a criminal investigation or prosecuting a case. And what was revealed through this investigation was a man who had spent decades preying on women that he drugged and sexually assaulted, and a man who had evaded this moment here today for far too long. He used his celebrity, he used his wealth, he used his network of supporters to help him conceal his crimes. And now we really know today who was behind that act, who the real Bill Cosby was, and a jury has spoken with one voice in a court of law and found the defendant guilty of drugging and sexually assaulting Andrea Constand in his Elkins Park home. Now, there's a number of people up here, and I'm going to try to address as many of this as I can. But before you today is just a part of the team that worked tirelessly to get us to this point. And the most important person in this is Andrea Constand. There you are. 14 years later, it may be easy to forget that she was that first courageous person that stood up in public to go to the authorities and say that Bill Cosby drugged and sexually assaulted her. Her courage, her resilience in the face of horrible and unfounded attacks upon her and her family has been so inspiring to all of us. We thank her. We thank her family. We thank her mother, Gianna, for trusting us through this process of prosecuting her attacker. And standing next to her there is Dolores Triani, who with B.B. Kivitz were the ones that were asking the questions in that deposition that Judge Rebreno was referring to that got us to the point where we were able to reopen this case and seek justice. And standing with her through this whole process has been a lot of other courageous women who are willing to stand up and tell their stories about being drugged and sexually assaulted or raped. 19 were willing to stand up with us in this prosecution, take the witness stand, and we are humbled by the courage all of them showed. And we can't help but applaud and celebrate the courage of the 5 witnesses that had a chance to face Bill Cosby in this case, to tell the jury, to tell all of you what he did to them. So Heidi Thomas, Shalon Lasha, Janice Dickerson, Janice Baker Kinney, and Lisa Lott Lublin. We publicly here thank all of them. I called each of them after the verdict. Was not able to talk to all of them, but they know what they've done, and they know what their courage helped all of us do. So supporting all of these women have been the victim advocates, the victims groups, the women's groups, the anti-rape groups, and so many others. And each of these groups play such an important role in supporting these women and helping them to heal from the ordeal that they have been put through. Those are the people we all owe a debt of gratitude to today for their strength, for their resilience through this entire process, as well as every day, because they stand with us, they work with the victims, and they make a difference in their lives. I'm very grateful to stand here before you with this team, and again, it's not all of our team who worked to see that justice was done, but we had to overcome many legal hurdles that were thrown at us by various defense lawyers who have been on this case for the past 28 months. And this time from the lawyers of 4 different law firms, and each step of the way we fought for the opportunity for the victims to be heard, the opportunity to get this case to a jury, an opportunity to be standing before all of you after hearing the defendant had been convicted of 3 counts of aggravated indecent assault. This team has been incredible. I can't say enough about the prosecutors, the detectives, dedicated staff who, despite everything that was thrown at us, at them, stayed the course, eye on the ball, and worked to get us here today. And I'm so incredibly proud of these talented people. They're committed always to do the right thing for the right reasons. And I'm going to have to start with, I think I heard them referred to recently as thunder and lightning. So Mr. Ryan here on my left, he heads our family protection unit, and you know he's prosecuted a lot of cases, sexual assaults, rapes, and those have been drugged in sexual assault cases. He's been with our office 6 years, and just is one of the best. You saw some of that talent coming across throughout this trial, and I got reports on how I looked as I was watching what they did, and it's the other thing I enjoy doing is coaching, and you know, you get to these points where you work with kids, you work with young adults, and you get to that point where you put them out on the field or onto the court, and there's not much you can do at that point other than watch. And I could not have been more proud of what they did throughout this whole thing, and some of the cross-examination that you all got to see, and some of the quick-witted remarks were something. I think even caused the jurors to laugh when testimony was being read or coming back on things, and where they had the ability to hear his closing, and Kristen here. So we wouldn't be here if not for her. And I say that because when we came back to look at this case, Risa Vetri Furman, and I should refer to as Judge Furman now, asked Kristen and some of our team to go to Toronto to meet with Andrea. And that was a difficult task. And when Kristen came back, she was adamant about what we should do, and we moved forward. And it was the right thing to do, and she has stuck through this the whole way. And she had an opportunity, which was kind of a bad day for me, when she had a great opportunity for her and her family to go to an excellent law firm, Stradley Ronan, and we talked a lot, and Kristen did not want to leave this and not see it to the end. And we talked to Bill Sasso, the chairman of the firm, who we all owe a debt of gratitude to for allowing her to stay on with us and stay with us through this case. And you have seen the results of that. She, like Mr. Ryan here, has prosecuted so many sexual assaults, domestic violence cases, and she's always stood up for victims and has continued to do this. And I couldn't have found two better partners through this, two better people, two better prosecutors to walk this journey with. Their commitment to doing the right thing has been extraordinary. And I got to talk about this one and the one on the end. Our Deputy District Attorney, Bob Fallon, the captain of our appellate unit, Adrian Jappy. I don't know if you all have noticed throughout the course of this, but we have seen what seemed like hundreds of motions from the beginning when these charges were filed throughout the last days of trial. And these incredible legal minds have found the law that we needed to support our positions, despite those many law firms and many lawyers that have made it difficult for us to get to this point. They've supported our positions to keep it moving forward. They have kept up with everything all of these lawyers have thrown at us, and did it with just amazing grace. You've seen them in court. You've seen what they can do, and there's been some pretty memorable writing along the way from each of them, and you all saw a difference maker too when the judge ruled that we could bring prior bad acts in. Adrian handled that argument and just did a stellar job to get us in the position we're in. Our law enforcement community, some of them are up here with me. All the folks from Cheltenham, Sergeant Schaefer, who you saw testify on the stand. But behind that testimony is thousands of hours of work, interviews, analysis, and just plain good police work to put together the case that he did. Our partners in this also have been the leaders of that police department. Now Chief Fry, who has walked this walk with us, and before him, John Norris, the chief who did the work, and when we were looking to open up this case, he was adamant on what we should do and where we should go with it, and he is a great man. Our affiants here, we got the quiet one over there, former Chief Shade, who's Detective Shade with our department, and Detective Reap, who I heard may be your birthday today. Yeah. We're all going to sing happy birthday now? No, just kidding. These detectives worked really hard to reopen this case and throughout the whole process. And I couldn't be more proud of the entire investigative team. They are supported by the lieutenant from our major crimes, Chris Kuklins, Deputy Chief Mark Bernsteel, who has handled so much of these investigative efforts, Chief Gallen, our Chief County Detective, and all the support that they provide and have picked up in this. Beyond the guilty verdict, there have been some other, I think, important outcomes in this case. As we understand, this has been important for sexual assault victims everywhere. But we did this case because a crime was committed against Andrea Constand, and it happened in our jurisdiction, and that was our duty to move forward on. And when you look at this and look at what Andrea has done to stand up and declare what happened to him, she has been a major factor in a movement that has gone in the right direction, finally. And her quiet courage and her actions through this have helped victims to stand up and tell what happened to them. And I think now there's tremendous awareness of how these crimes have been covered up and papered over for the years. And I hope and I pray that our actions have shown that we will stand up with those victims. And all women that are out there standing up and telling their truth, we support them and encourage them to keep it up. And I hope now everybody recognizes that here, you're going to be treated with dignity and respect through the process. Another outcome has been an increased look at rape myths or sexual assault myths, and the myth that a victim of sexual assault, especially by someone they knew or trusted, will immediately report it to the authorities, that they will behave in a certain way, or they will never talk to anyone again. We've dispelled that here, and that's because that's false, and that's not always the way it goes. Too often these types of crimes, sexual assault, do not get reported, especially in cases where a drug has been used in a drug-facilitated sexual assault. An intoxicant, so the victim does not have a clear memory of what went on. So we hope that this case sends a strong message that the victims of these types of crimes can come forward and be heard on what happened to them. So there was a defendant in this case. The next steps. A sentencing date will be issued by the judge. That is typically within about a 60 to 90 day period of time on when the sentencing date will come. In the interim, he'll be looked at and assessed in a couple ways. There's a pre-sentence investigation that will be done. There'll be a sexually violent predator assessment that will be done. And all these are standard procedures in these type of cases. These assessments will then be used by the judge in determining the sentence, and that sentencing hearing will have the opportunity to put evidence on, as will the defense. The defendant may be facing years in prison. He was convicted of 3 counts of this, so technically that would be up to 30 years. However, we have to look at merger of those counts to determine what the final maximum will be that he is facing. So in addition to jail time, and I mention this because there's been some things that have been asked about it over time, and typically what is done in a case is that a defendant will be assessed, and all of these things will be looked at in terms of a sentencing. But when a sentencing occurs, there's also an assessment for the costs of prosecution. We expect that we'll be arguing that the costs associated with both the trials, the sequestration, the sheriff's costs for this will go to the defendant. And I will be relying on defense counsel's opening remarks in this when he was talking about $3.38 million being a paltry sum or simply a nuisance. So clearly the costs of prosecution in this matter should not be a problem for the defendant. Dolores, you wanted to say something here, so let me get out of the way.
Good afternoon. I know it's going to be disappointing to you, but I have the privilege of speaking for Andrea, and Andrea will not be speaking today. Only I will. First of all, we have to thank Montgomery County for doing what they have done. Kevin, Kristen, Stewart, and the many, many lawyers in the DA's office who have been diligent in bringing about this just result. I can't even begin to name all the people who have worked on this case. We also, and I'm doing this on behalf of myself and my co-counsel, B.B. Kivitz, who unfortunately moved to Philadelphia and is probably stuck on the Schuylkill as we speak, or she would also be here. But we also want to thank all the police officers who've dedicated themselves to this case, Detective Reap, Sergeant Schaefer, Detective Shade, and the many others who are unnamed, who all contributed to what has happened here today. But most of all, I want to express, on behalf, if I can, the gratitude of so many women who admire Andrea for her courage. She came here 14 years ago for justice. I am so happy today that I can say that although justice was delayed, it was not denied. It took a lot of courage for her to come back and to do this. There are so many people who've expressed their admiration for her. The millions, and I do mean millions of people who have admired her courage, admired her calm, admired her demeanor. And I'd ask you to bear in mind that when something like this happens to someone, male or female, whoever, they have to work every day to be happy. Something that we all who have been fortunate in our lives and not been victimized do not have to do. And when you see Andrea, and you've all commented about how calm she is, how graceful she is, that's something that she's had to work out every day since January of 2004, probably January 6th or 7th, when this happened to her. This is a life-altering experience for any woman, any victim. And the person who I think needs to be heralded for what she has done is Andrea. Thank you.
All right, we'll take questions.
Kevin,
Go ahead.
You were
in the moment as this verdict was being read. Take us back, please. I know there was an exchange with the defendant immediately after for bail revocation, but in those moments, what was going through your mind, please?
Well, I've been at this for a while, 25 years, and when a verdict comes back, you're always anxious on what the result was going to be. I keep the verdict sheet in front of me, and I checked them off as they were read. It's a solemn moment because it's hard work for a jury, 12 ordinary folks from our community that came in and served, and so I didn't react. I won't under those circumstances, and we heard the verdict, and I'm just grateful for what they did, and that they were willing to stand with us in this and stand up for what happened. I have never seen the type of attacks that were levied on people that were coming forward to describe how they were sexually assaulted, and when that happened, I was concerned. I was really concerned that that we're not moving past the vestiges of what happened before, that people wouldn't get it. But I think they listened to Dr. Ziv. They heard what was real and what was false, and they were strong when they came back. They were polled, meaning that every one of them was asked whether they agreed to the verdict, and all I heard from each of them was strength, and I'm grateful for that, and grateful for what they all did and the commitment that they gave to Montgomery County, our citizens, our communities, and this is bigger. So, yeah, Jim.
During the discussion of bail, an incredible outburst by the defendant. Throughout your opening and closing statements, you've said this is not Dr. Huxtable, this is not America's dad. Is that the man that you were speaking of?
Well, I guess you got to see a brief view of who he was. That's just him acting out. I think everybody got to see who he really is when each of those prior bad act witnesses got to testify. The guy was an actor for a long time, and it was an act. It was an act.
Kevin,
We got to see who he really was. So.
Kevin, standing here before us, you speak with emotion in your voice, especially in talking about Andrea. You speak with tears in your eyes. Describe emotionally what this process has been like for you, especially considering the critics who did not think it was worth retrying this case.
Look, this is about our duty as prosecutors, and it's really not that complicated. It's about doing the right thing. We had to investigate a case. We had to make determinations on what happened, and then move forward. And that's our job, and that's our duty. And we, I hope, did it in as graceful a way as we could, despite what was being thrown at us and being thrown at a number of people. But I'm not going to get into nonsense with him on this. Yeah.
Do you think other prosecutors will look to this case in dealing with allegations of sexual assault against high-profile?
I don't know. I mean, I can't speak for anyone else, but I can tell you it's been an interesting start to becoming district attorney. I have had a couple cases here that have been with powerful people, as most of you know. I tried a case where the chief law enforcement officer in the state had committed crimes, and we had to go in, and that's not the most comfortable place to be when you have to tear apart your profession in some ways, because she was a prosecutor. But I think that's just an example of, we're gonna go where the investigations take us. We are going to look to see who has committed a crime, and whether they're powerful, whether they're wealthy, whether they have evaded the law in the past. We just have to do our jobs, and I hope if there's anything that comes from this is that you can move forward on these cases, and when you do, I've now had 2 juries stand up against the powerful and say guilty on every single count that has been alleged against them, and I think that's a recognition of the fact that we're doing the right thing, and the fact that the juries understand the significance of this.
Kevin,
Carl.
are you going to continue your attempts to get bail revoked for Mr. Cosby before sentencing occurs?
Well, we're going to.
And express
Yeah.
what your concerns are about.
Well, I said it in court. I'm concerned when there is somebody with the wealth and the aspects of being a potential risk of flight because of what he's facing. The judge made a determination, and I respect his determination, that that could be satisfied by him remaining in Montgomery County for the present, and we'll have to take a look at it.
So it's not necessarily a closed issue for you at this point?
Well, no, I mean, these things never are. I mean, we have cases every day where people are out on bail and they commit new crimes, or they try to flee, or they do something along those lines. We just have to be vigilant and make sure that we're keeping an eye on every aspect of this, so that we can be prepared if something like that happens. Yes, sir.
Mr. Steele, Tom Mesereau said that the fight is not over, and a number of legal experts have pointed to the 404B witnesses, the prior bad act witnesses, as being a potential vulnerability on appeal. Can you talk about how you're ready to defend against that, and do you feel confident that that's not going to expose you to problems on appeal?
So I mentioned them before. We have our Deputy District Attorney, Bob Fallon, Captain of our unit, Adrian Jappy. I'll put them up against anybody. And they walked with us through this, and we asked for 19, and we felt that we had the grounds for 19, or otherwise we wouldn't be asking for it. So we're appreciative that 5 women got to voice what occurred to them in the courtroom, but this is a case where there were so many more.
Attorney?
Yeah.
Do you expect to have some more women testify at the sentencing? Would that be the appropriate place for more victims?
Potentially. I mean, that's something, and I'm not going to say today what we're going to be asking for in terms of sentencing. That's all the assessments that need to be done. So you do the pre-sentence investigation. You look at what these assessments developed. You speak to victims. They get a voice in this, and they should have a voice in this, to make a determination of what the appropriate request is at the time. So that's all the process that we'll be going through in between now and when the sentencing date is.
But it is more appropriate, a place where more victims potentially could be.
Potentially can, but it's also an area that is somewhat gray in Pennsylvania, to be able to do that. So we've heard testimony in effect from 5 of the women at this point. So I think that goes into the consideration, and we'll we'll be assessing it, and our appellate unit will tell us what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do.
Attorney,
Yes, sir.
Have you been, has your office been approached by any new Cosby accusers since the trial began?
I can't speak about investigative matters. I'll leave it at that.
Mr. Steele?
Yes, sir.
This is a vastly different trial, obviously, than the first one. Speak, if you can, about the importance of having those 5 women allowed to testify, the additional accusers, and also counteracting the defense's con artist claims, Margot Jackson's testimony.
So you all got to hear from someone who I think very highly of, Dr. Barbara Ziv. And the legislature, in their wisdom, has given us the ability to have somebody who is an expert in this area educate a jury. And you saw that as our number one witness, our first witness in this case. And I think in the process, she was able to explain the situation. And then when you heard from the different people and you saw what the defense was trying to do, despite those sexual assault myths that lie out there, I think there's a recognition. And again, I hope it's not a tack that's continued, because it didn't work. And it is a situation where it was a different trial. We were able to do that on the front end of the case, and I think that's the benefit of having done this once before. So.
Without the legislature making that change only a few years ago to allow someone like Dr. Ziv, you wouldn't have been able to call her to the stand. How critical was she in your ability to secure a conviction today?
I think that would be a better question for the jurors on how impactful she was, but to us, it was very important, and it's something that we kept going back to and looking at. And Kristen did the direct examination from her, but we went back to that report that she did a lot because it was significant in showing what the real science is behind this and how this goes. And Dr. Valliere, who testified in the last trial about this, she's another great expert in this arena, and I think it's important that these messages get out, that's what this is. And maybe at some point we won't need to put on an expert to educate a jury, because we'll all recognize that those sexual assault myths are not real, and we should be looking at everything that happens to somebody who has been sexually assaulted.
Any chance that Marguerite Jackson could face perjury charges?
Can't talk about investigations.
Kevin, can you talk a little bit about the difference between having a local jury pool, a Montgomery County jury, as opposed to an out-of-town jury, and whether you think that had an impact, like maybe the difference? I'm not saying for anybody, but this jury to me seemed very different. It seemed to be really paying close attention. They took a lot of notes. They remind me a lot of the Sandusky jury, actually. They really were paying attention. So, do you think that had an impact, having a Montgomery County jury? Do you think that helped? Obviously it helped, you won, but
I appreciate being on my home court.
Okay.
I do. We have a great community here. We have a community that supports law enforcement. We have a community of people that sacrifice so much. To think going into this, you're going to be removed from your family, as the defense kept saying, for a month, is a huge sacrifice to make. But their willingness to do this, and as you said, to pay the rapt attention that they did to every step of the way, we're just grateful. And I'm grateful that we live in this community. I'm grateful that we get to choose jurors like that who do the right thing, and that's what happens here, and it happens over and over again. So, yeah, it was great being on our home court.
Mr. Steele, what is your message to prosecutors in other jurisdictions, whether they be New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago, Chester County, who may view these cases as historically very difficult to prosecute? After today, what's your message to any prosecutor who may be on the fence about pushing forward with a case of this nature?
I'm not here to send messages to my colleagues. We are in a great community of prosecutors, particularly in Pennsylvania, and I get to work with them through the Pennsylvania District Attorneys Association, and all I can tell you about that is the incredible outpouring of support that I've gotten every step of the way along this journey. They've been great, and I look at our colleagues in the Attorney General's office, and how they've walked this walk with us. Michelle Henry, for example, who tried the Kane case with me. Each step of the way, these folks are here to support. So I don't think it's any need or time to send a message to all of them. We're all working these cases together, and each person has to deal with it in their own jurisdictions. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Steele, what is your thought to victims out there? Because as Kristen said in her closing arguments, they were character assassinations that took place in that courtroom. And if someone feels too scared to come forth at this time, just a chilling effect.
I hope the end result will not cause somebody to refrain from coming forward, because we got to the right result in this, and yeah, it's difficult, and people were put through character assassinations, and it was very difficult to sit through and watch, but you also saw what the jury did in the end, and I hope that people recognize that you got to show courage like this lady did. Like, she showed courage. She stepped up. She went forward, and we got to the right result. And she stayed through this. She didn't have to start down this journey with us. She didn't have to come here for the first trial. She didn't have to come here for the second trial, but she did. And I think that means so much. And I hope that others that have been victimized understand that and see that courage and see where it can get. Because for all of us, it was just about doing justice. And sometimes you feel like that's just us that is looking for that, and you got a lot of people working against you to that end. But despite each of these legal hurdles, these things that happened across the way, we got here, and we got to all sit in that courtroom and hear the defendant convicted of all of the offenses, found guilty. And I think that's important for victims to know and understand, that we're going to stand with them. We're going to walk this journey with them, and do the best that we can and treat them with dignity and respect.
Evan, you talked about what that was like, being able to mark off on your sheet for each count as guilty. Describe the moment when you were finally able to turn and face Andrea after you both had heard the verdict.
I waited till we got upstairs and I gave her a hug.
Kevin, what big a hurdle was it for you when you guys reopened this, knowing that, the DA at the time in 2005 declined to prosecute, and, you guys made a point of apologizing to Andrea in your closings and thanking her, which I thought was pretty powerful. I mean, how do you think she was treated back then? I mean, they talked a lot about being right in the middle of the investigation when Bruce Castor abruptly pulled the plug. He didn't even have the courtesy to let Andrea Constand know they were pulling the plug. Dolores Triani found out from reporters showing up on the doorstep. There were press releases issued where she was basically threatened with arrest herself, and they were threatened with arrest. I mean, there were a lot of hurdles you had to overcome, even obviously getting her to agree to this. What was that like for you guys? And how do you think she was treated back then?
All I'll say on that was, on behalf of our office, we are sorry for what happened then, but we got a chance to make up for it, and we hopefully have. We hopefully have. So, all right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Andrea, do you have one word?
Joe,